So have a look at that as well. So thank you for that. Julie.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Oh my goodness. So, you know, when I mentioned the online safety trenches over the last 2 decades, I had a number of people in this room in mind, but particularly you. And we first met in the
96-ish?
Yep. You were at Microsoft.
Yes.
How did you get from Microsoft to becoming the ESafety Commissioner of Australia?
Well, it was actually a longer journey than that. When I think about how I got here, you know, nobody studies or hopes to be an online safety professional.
Not yet.
So in the early 1990s, I finished university and came to Washington, D.C. to work for my hometown congressman with big ideals and even bigger hair. And
what was your hometown again?
Seattle.
Seattle.
And so I was working on a range of social issues, homelessness, children's family issues, and he thought he'd throw me a bone by giving me cross-subsidization of telcos. And he said, well, we've got this small little software company in our district. It's called Microsoft. So maybe you can work on telecommunications and technology issues along with the social issues. So that was that intersection of social issues with technology before there was an internet.
Wow.
And then I inevitably ended up at Microsoft as one of their second government affairs professionals back in 1995.
Yes, and we had offices not far from each other on Wisconsin Avenue. And who was the guy running the office at the time?
Jack Krumholtz. Who's still a fixture in Washington, D.C. I believe he's at the Glover Park Group.
And he had a fantastic car. He used to take
Jack and his Jeep, and then came Julie.
Right.
So it was all about the Jays.
All right. So sorry if we're just doing a little
We're just
reminiscing here. So let's get proper now. Actually, before we even dive into some of the questions I have, any immediate reactions to some of what you've heard this morning, the research or the discussions?
Well, it's fantastic, and as you know, we had our own inaugural conference just 2 weeks ago with NetSafe, our counterpart from New Zealand. And it was really interesting because there are so many similarities in terms of the technological and online safety challenges that we're facing. And we're using a lot of the same approaches to address them, but having these conversations about what parents think here or what kids are doing there, and then trying to adopt the approaches and apply it to your own marketplace is such a useful exercise to go through. So I was just fascinated with what I just heard on that panel. And God, I love that guy's eyes in the Cuba video. Just the wonder of being exposed to the internet. And I think we've lost that because we've been exposed to technology for so long in the developed world.
So, you know, some people will not be familiar with the ESafety Commission and your role. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, so I've been lucky. My career has been bookended by careers in government, first in the U.S. Government and now in the Australian government. And in about 2014, there was a celebrity who was hosting Australia's Top Model, and she was brutally trolled on Twitter twice. First, she had a nervous breakdown, and then she came back on, and she tragically committed suicide. That was about the time that I joined Twitter, and of course, the sensationalist media there were referring to it as the Twitter suicide. So that was quite a job to try and turn around that safety story and show that commitment. But it started a petition, and people started calling on government to do something. And so it was interesting, again, being on the other side and working with government in terms of drafting this bill that would create a legislative cyberbully scheme, as well as an e-safety office that was actually targeted initially at children. So through the legislation, they took different online safety functions that had been spread throughout a bunch of different agencies and departments, consolidated this into one office. And so it's unique. And in July of this year, our remit was extended to just looking after the safety of children, to the safety of all Australians. So, you know, it's pretty unprecedented. We have about 80 people, and it's a government agency solely dedicated to looking after the online safety of all of our citizens, and taking a very holistic approach from prevention, education, encouraging behavioral change, and then we've got 3 complaints lines and tools and an overall inquiries line. So we're also focused on remediation and support.
My goodness. So you will know Baroness Joanna Shields. She's the
Yes.
UK Minister for Internet Safety. We've done events with her. Compare and contrast your role with her role, your commission with UKIS, the UK Council for Child Internet Safety.
Yeah. Well, I would never compare myself to the Baroness. She's just a wonderful, incredible lady. But I did say to her when we met up a couple weeks ago, "You've worked at every company I haven't worked at." You know, she obviously had a very significant role, a significant time when David Cameron was in power and unavoidable choice. But her role was very political. I'm what is called, you know, an independent statutory authority. So I actually run an agency, and it's bipartisan, so I'm not tied to any one government. So that means I can also make independent decisions.
Oh. And are you seeing any other similar bodies, positions popping up around the world?
Well, NetSafe is, as you know, has been an NGO for a long time. They're now what is called an approved agency. So they're not an arm of the government, but they have the imprimatur of the government to administer the Digital Harms Act. But no, and it's been tremendous how much interest there has been when I've traveled around the world and talked to people to just say, hey, that's fantastic that your government thinks this issue is important enough to put an entire government agency devoted to this. And you know, as the way we see it, you know, our job keeps expanding, our remit keeps expanding. You know, I'd love to work myself out of a job, but I don't think that's going to happen because you know, as we know, safety is a journey, not a destination. And as we talked about here, there will continue to be emerging and different threat vectors as new technologies come online. But it's also important to remember what we're actually dealing with are societal and behavioral issues online that have been around from time immemorial. If you're talking about bullying or privacy or even slut shaming, which we're seeing a lot with what we call image-based abuse versus the more sensationalist term revenge porn, a lot of victim blaming. I keep thinking of Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter and the Big A.
Let's talk a little bit about the image-based abuse portal that was recently launched.
Yes, it was.
And, you know, we get the Australian papers over here on the internets. There's been some controversy around that. Tell us, what was the reasoning behind it? What headwinds have you hit, and how are you responding?
Yeah, so about 3 weeks ago, we launched the first government-led image-based abuse tool. We had about 400 victims come into our office with concerns or indicating that they'd been victims. And just so you know, we decided to call it image-based abuse rather than revenge porn, because our question was revenge for what? And is this porn that's been created for the prurient interest? No. And again, that leads back to the victim blaming is quite sensationalist. It's also a very small proportion of the types of abuse that we were seeing coming into our office. As many of you know, there's a whole new lexicon springing up around this, from upskirting, down-blousing, creep shots, snaking, sextortion, hacking of phones, you know, stealing of images, you name it. So we set about creating a portal that would provide, you know, victims, this is a devastating thing, and victims are in distress. So we wanted to make an easy portal where they could get help, take action, go immediately to the social media sites, because the most expeditious way to get that content down is to go directly to the social media sites, get them legal support. We have a patchwork of laws around this, so depending on what state you live in, what criminal penalties apply, what civil penalties apply, how do you collect evidence, when do you go to the police, and if we've got some resources guides for friends, families, and even for perpetrators. So a lot of people aren't necessarily motivated by revenge. We know that, you know, young people have had a few drinks, just a swipe of the thumb, an image goes out there, it goes viral. There are people out there that engage in that realize they've created a real world of hurt, and this helps them walk their way through how they can provide some redress and relief for victims. So the controversy wasn't probably around, that you're referring to wasn't around our image-based abuse portal and reporting tool. the controversy I think you've seen recently in the U.S. was around our limited pilot partnership with Facebook. And I think in some ways...
So describe that pilot.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's part of what I want to do as a commissioner. You know, we've got some hard power and we've got soft power. So one of my goals is to encourage companies to incorporate safety by design into their products, but also to continue to innovate and invest in safety. And it's got to be a continuing journey. And Facebook put together a really impressive group of victims advocates around the world to think about how do we solve this problem of image-based abuse, or what they refer to as NCII. Currently,
spell your acronyms.
Yes, non-consensual intimate images.
NCII. Okay.
NCII. And so I thought, hey, this is fantastic. Currently, this is actually allowing potential victims who are being sextorted or might be concerned of ex-partner retribution. You know, they're being threatened that their images are going to be shared on either Facebook Messenger or Instagram, the largest social media sites in the world. You can actually give that power and back to the potential victim and give them a stake in helping control their own online safety journey. I thought it was a tremendous idea, and Facebook has put a lot of thought into the security, and this is why they're using Messenger, secure, peer-to-peer. So we felt confident that that was secure. Yes, there's viewing on the other side by their community operations team, but they're audited, they're vetted, they're trained. These are the people that look at child sexual exploitation and pro-terrorist content every day. There are lots of protections there. So we thought this is a speculative risk that has been reported on and a minimal risk compared to the actual acute and potential harms that can happen if that picture gets out there. So I commend them for trying to push the envelope here. And our role is in helping vet the people who might participate in the program so that they're well suited to it. They understand that small calculated risk, that they're over 18, and you know that their images that they deliver express consent. So.
So the headline, "Facebook's now asking for my nude photographs," is way over the top?
I think it's way over the top.
Serious headline, by the way.
But you know what was really interesting? So when we launched, and Antigone was kind enough to come out to Australia, we launched it. We're the home of sensationalist media. I mean, Rupert Murdoch is from Australia, and we had straight reportage of that about what we were trying to achieve. And then it started to spiral, and then the reporting got really sloppy. People were speculating. Don't let the facts get in the way of the good story. Don't even talk to the yeah. So it was a little disappointing, but I think we'll get back on track. Again, you've got people like Cindy Southworth, and Marianne Franks, Carrie Goldberg. You know, some of the world-renowned victims, advocates, and specialists in this area backing this. This is great. This is a company taking a proactive move to solve a problem, and you know, we'll continue to encourage companies to do so.
Good for you. So you recently met the Pope.
I did.
What on earth was that about, and what was the gathering and context?
Well,
Put it into perspective.
I'm often accused of having foot-in-mouth disease, and I did a little bit of that, you know, by blessing him instead of letting him be blessed by me. But
well, he needs all. No, go on.
Yeah. No, actually, the Pontifical Gregorian University, which was the Jesuit university affiliated with the Vatican, held a conference called Protecting Child Dignity in the Digital Age. And I thought the first opening day was pretty extraordinary. I mean, they've gathered, you know, Ernie Allen and the Baroness and the priests and others were all sitting there. And they made some pretty startling admissions about the role in the church in violating the sanctity of children over the years and needing to make amends for that, but also to looking forward. How do we protect the dignity of children in the digital age? And what can our institution do to make a difference, and they had a startling number. It was kind of like a speed dating format. They had so much talent. You know, they had the preeminent thinkers in this space in the room talking for 10 to 15 minutes apiece. We ended up with a Rome Declaration and 13 steps for governments and other institutions to take. And the next step will be an interfaith dialogue. And so I do think it's great that potentially educational and religious institutions all over the world will start taking a stake and being responsible in this space.
Brilliant, brilliant. We're running quickly out of time, but I wanted to ask you about the cyberbullying reporting scheme.
Yep.
Talk about that. And do you have any figures yet? Do you have any anecdotal evidence of how it's working?
Right. Well, the whole concept behind this cyberbullying scheme was that we want to serve as a safety net for young people, Australians 18 years and younger, who may experience serious cyberbullying, harassment, or intimidation. Report it to a social media site, and within 48 hours, if it isn't taken down, they can come to us. And what I think is happening here, we've resolved 600 complaints thus far, but cyberbullying now is so complex. It's often an extension of what is happening in the schoolyard or elsewhere. And a lot of moderators, you know, having worked inside a couple of companies, you've got 30 seconds to a minute to look at the content. You often miss the context. It's a volume question. So we're able to advocate on behalf of the young person, assess whether or not it is serious cyberbullying, and then we pick up the phone because we have established relationships with the social media sites. We have a two-tier system. Those that opt into Tier 1 are proactively saying, we'll engage with you, we'll give you 24/7 contact. We can declare a Tier 2 player, and there are some like Google and Facebook that are in that category. If then we can, for the Tier 2s, if they don't comply with what we think is a serious cyberbullying case that they don't take down, they're subject to $18,000 a day in fines.
Wow.
And that might not be a big deal for a major social media site, but reputationally it is. So again, we use the carrot, and the companies don't want this kind of content on their sites. So when we point it out to them, they're happy to escalate it and take it down. But it is good to have that stick in the background to encourage others, particularly the smaller companies that just may not be mature enough or have a robust safety process in place.
Right.
To get them into line.
Very cool, very cool. So you're with us for the rest of the day?
I am.
You have two colleagues sitting over here?
I do.
Two colleagues, put your hands up.
Yes, two colleagues.
So if you have issues or questions or would love to follow up with Australians in our midst, they are here.
Yeah, I'm sorry for not having the charming accent, but they both do.
They absolutely do. I think your accent is very charming, and I'm really, really pleased and delighted you were able to make the journey back. I don't know if we'll be doing this in 2 decades' time, but certainly in the years to come, I'm looking forward, particularly getting down under, because I know you and the Kiwis are going to do another joint event next year, and then it's back to you guys. It's going to jump back and forth across the Tasman Sea, right?
Yep. Look out for an ESafety 18, and if you want to come, you're all welcome.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Julie Inman-Grant, people.
Thank you.